Well, let's get more on the situation facing schools now. I don't know if your children are going to school every day, but you know the disruption that only going to school every second day or every second week can cause, and how many children are losing out on really a proper quality education. It's all because of the pandemic. Professor Chika Sihoole is the Dean of Faculty of Education at the University of Pretoria. Professor, good afternoon to you, and I do appreciate your time this afternoon. Where do you stand on this? Do you believe we should be trying to get our children back into school for face-to-face teaching full-time at this stage?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you for inviting me. I think, as you know, I'm an educator. My heart is in education, in the teaching and learning of our children. And it breaks my heart when I hear stories of our children not being able to be in school on a daily basis. However, we need to be aware of the challenges which government is facing and everybody, parents and teachers are facing in terms of the pandemic. So it's not a straightforward answer. There is no straightforward answer to that question. If you were to ask me, I would say that I would like children to be back at school. However, we know that we are dealing with a situation which nobody has control over, which is the problem of the pandemic. And I think government has so far done very well in terms of containing the pandemic. And we should not, put our foot wrong, at this time and find ourselves, investing the gains which government has made in terms of containing the pandemic.
So what's been happening up until now, as I understand it, in most schools around the country, probably 80% of schools are around there, is that teachers have been teaching much smaller classes. Now, you're a teacher, you're wearing a face mask, you are teaching children who are wearing face masks, but they're teaching to a much smaller class. Now, if we were to suddenly have full-time classes again, you would have, say, 35 learners in a class, all wearing face masks, a teacher wearing a face mask. I would find that as a teacher quite daunting, quite difficult. Would that be difficult for a teacher to teach a normal-sized class, not a smaller class like they've become used to, with everyone wearing a face mask?
Well, it's going to be something new for the teacher, and it's going to be something new for all the learners who will be finding themselves in that classroom with in those large numbers. So it's not going to be something easy for the teachers and for everybody involved. However, as I indicated earlier on, I think we need to tread carefully before we even consider going that direction. I think it should be a considered step that that is well calculated to ensure that we don't expose both our teachers and our learners to the risks. But so far, things have been going well. We are now dealing with the aftermath of the rise in numbers after the Easter. If those numbers come down, we can consider, having our learners going back to school. As you know, Stephen, with every day a learner loses time for teaching, it is, every time they lose time for learning, it is a lost opportunity which is which is going to haunt us in a long time going into the future. So the earlier our children return to classrooms, the better. But at the moment, I think it's something that needs to be well calculated before we can take that step.
The other issue, of course, is that if, as we know, as you say, I think we all know that children are losing massive amounts of what I would call education time. They're losing, everyday units of education time. They're not getting the same number of teaching hours. If we thought that the system could repair that damage, if we thought that we could recover, I think maybe we'd be feeling a little easier. But the longer this goes on, the less time there would be to recover. Have I got that right?
You're correct, Stephen. And what UNESCO has characterized this phenomenon which we're dealing with at the moment, what the pandemic has caused on the schooling, it has characterized it as a generational catastrophe. And, the more we continue with students, learners outside of the classroom, the more it is a challenge to repair the damage. So at the moment, I think government's hands are tied, and it's a choice between life and education. And at the moment, I think protection of life should take precedence.
There are obviously many things here. We've got children themselves, we've got parents, we've got teachers. There needs to be a whole lot of consultation. We have unions that may disagree. They may disagree with each other. We're a complicated country to govern. We all know this. We all know to an extent why this is, partly because of our past. Is there a way for our education department and for Cabinet to make decisions more quickly? Or do you think it actually has to take as long as it sometimes does, just because of the nature of our society?
Well, we've got a principle of decision-making in this country, which is based on consultation, which is based on representativity. Your government believes in canvassing enough views before it can take an action, because if it rushes into making the decision or some of the decisions, it may lead to a fallout with some important stakeholders. So I would go for a route where government consults, because I think as a country we have done well in terms of, especially in education, in terms of dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. And we cannot afford, as I said earlier on, to put our foot wrong at this juncture.
What this does, what happens though, is that we know that this just re-entrenches an education inequality, which is created by our inequality, which is already present. I mean, it really does that. That's the consequence, unfortunately.
True, and unbeknown to me, over the weekend I was talking with a school principal friend of mine who told me a story that broke my heart, telling me that in the first term in his school, grade 8 and 9 learners, they were in school only for 9 days, because they are coming to school only once a week, and the term had 9 weeks, so they were assessed on the work that was done over 9 days. Can you believe it, Stephen? What a catastrophe that is. So I think the effect and the impact of what we're dealing with is yet to be realized, and we need all stakeholders involved to have sober mind in finding solutions or a viable solution to this problem, rather than finger pointing. And we should not. There shouldn't be anybody who fold the arms and wait for solution from somewhere. Government, education union, teacher unions, parents should just have a clear understanding of what is it that we are dealing with, and we find a viable way forward that will take us forward as a country, and with all the associated risks involved.
I mean, Professor, when you have a story like that, I mean, these children haven't really started the grade that they're in. I mean, I hate to say it, but it makes me wonder if we need to do something dramatic, to all of these children, as awful as this is. Would they need to start the grade again? Do we need to just hit the pause button in the entire education sector and sort of start again? But I don't know if we can do that.
Well, it's something very difficult, to do, like stop everything and start everything again. I think we'll have to wait for this pandemic to be over in order to think about the way in which we can go forward. We can, redress and deal with the damage that would have been caused to the education system, but also to this generation, which we are dealing with at the moment. And at the same time, we also do not want to see ourselves in a situation which India finds itself at the moment, because of not having taken the necessary precautions. So it's a very difficult situation, Stephen, and as I'm saying, it really requires sober minds. And just to throw in another spanner into this thing, I shudder to think about what the matric results are going to be this year, because the grade 12s of this year, they are the ones who were at home last year during the pandemic, when we were in level 5, 4, 3, and 2, and they are now back in school. They are attending school every day. The department needs to be applauded for the measures which it put in place to ensure that teaching and learning of these learners takes place every day. But we cannot take away the effect and the impact of the loss of learning last year. And it's going to be manifested in the results at the end of the year more than it was in the matriculants of 2020.